This is my tiny home container speed build. I was actually really pleased with this. These are the two characters I built the house for. This is the first time I've done a tiny home. I don't know why I ended up doing two Sims instead of just one, but it did kind of make it more challenging and more fun. This is also the first time I have ever played with like any kind of like major terraforming aspects. Normally I just kind of have a flat lot. Sometimes I do some like gardening. So this is the first time I've approached that as well. I definitely think it could have been better, but for the first time doing it, I am quite pleased with how it turned out. I tried to make like a little hill space for them to kind of like walk up on. I did build it in the Eco Lifestyles neighborhood. I forget what the name of it is. Evergreen Harbor, I think, maybe. Um, Initially, I wasn't quite sure what I was going to build. I settled on a tiny home. It took me quite a bit to figure out what my vision for this was, which I think was fun initially to kind of go in thinking or go in with very little parameters. Normally when I go into a build with anything, I think like like I go in with an idea first. Whereas this time I'm like, I just need to make a tiny home. And I had no idea what it was I wanted to do. But as soon as I put on this container wall and door, I was like, that's it. This is gonna be the house. And I started just running with it. And it immediately became like the perfect build. It's funny living in a neighborhood that kind of has some of these like houses around too. Like they're much larger than this, but I have near me two shipping container houses with some other construction. Uh so I guess I did kind of pull inspiration from those as well. I don't know. I always thought that like living in a shipping container could be fun, but I don't know if I could do it for more than a year. You know. So this is kind of the layout I settled on, as you saw at the very beginning. I have these two stacked shipping containers held up by like these concrete posts. And I wanted to make them different colors because I kind of made it a little bit more like vibrant, but also like kind of. I imagine if you were to order shipping containers for yourself, somehow you're likely not going to get like the same color. As you can see, I already gave them like a floor to ceiling window to use, and then I was really thinking like how like obviously in a shipping container they have like a metal floor as well. Um, so I was thinking about what kind of lighting we would have and what kind of floor they would have because initially like or if you were to build a house out of a shipping container, which obviously, something people do, or I wouldn't have had the inspiration to do this. Or I would imagine these items wouldn't exist in The Sims, right? I was like, I need to make a like cozier. I think I installed Palia the other day, and I wanted to make sure it was there. That was weird. um, I wanted to make a cozier home, obviously, but also still kind of have like an industrial feel. Something that people would like decide to live in, but still has the roots of what the container is. So I settled on these bars, like these kind of crossbars initially, because if you were to like hang art on your wall or something, you probably wouldn't be able to put it directly in the shipping container. So we have these wood beams going across as like a way for them to like hang a painting or pictures. Obviously, they live in a tiny house, so I needed to figure out where to put the ladder, how this would work. It took me a bit to figure out what I thought the best look was. if I wanted to put it against those, if the ladder went up into the middle of their like upper story, what that looks like. So I settled on this for the time being, and there was quite a bit of thought process going into the layout of the house. You're gonna see a lot of changes happening here, but I had a large deliberation with myself, deciding between the location of all of our like smaller spaces in the room and how those things would all fit together. So I settled with the ladder against the wall here for now, and then I was like, okay, this is good. Let me see about a balcony for them. I didn't realize at the time while making this that this would count as a room, which makes sense, but then they can't use, like, I don't get the tiny home bonuses, which this isn't a playable, like, I'm not gonna play on this little save file, but I wanted it to be a tiny home, so I had to get rid of the railing. So they have like an exposed upper balcony. I went back to them a few times for like inspiration. It's like, these are the two people living here. What is it going to look like? I was trying to figure out the beams briefly and then settled with just like how they looked. One of my favorite things to build, and usually where I start in any house, is the kitchen. So I created a tiled space for them to cook on. This is like where their tiny kitchen and their tiny home is going to be. One of my annoyances with this particular thing was when I was picking their mini fridge to use, they only have a induction burner. But when I was looking at the mini fridge, it has like face masks and like cucumber like slices in it, and it doesn't look like food, which like kind of annoyed me. And I kind of wish like they had a separate fridge for me to use. I had some deliberation with the sinks as well. I wanted it to feel like kind of industrial still. As you can see, like their kitchen countertops, like their drawers kind of feel more like a workbench rather than like a kitchen. So I was trying to keep like that kind of vibe the whole time. I ended up settling on this sink because I liked that it looked like the faucet moved rather than it just being like a work sink. I decided to give it a little bit of like a moodier lighting with the string lights. Or not moody, but like instead of just having the overhead lights, I went with these string lights as like the way for them to light their space. This is their bathroom space, which I always struggle with doors, especially here, because I have like this kind of craftsman kind of like industrial vibe, and I like that other door from Starstruck, but the doorknob is the shape of a star and it really annoyed me, so I ended up settling on a more boring door. For the build as well, all of the outside walls, like the walls that touch the outside, I still have as like the shipping container wall, but any wall that I built inside, I imagined was like going to be made out of a different material. So I went with this like reclaimed wood on the outside, and then for the inside, I knew that most, like, I think I just make it white, and then I gave them a shower in this one corner. Sorry, I just got something in my eye. Wow. I gave them a shower, and I give them a toilet. One of my favorite things, and if you watched my last speed build, I also gave them like a glass half wall to block the shower. And it feels like a really, like, that is a shower space without having to use the shower item. I can just do like the shower head in the wall and then put that in. And then I gave them a squat toilet, and that's their bathroom. It made the most sense for me. No sink, because obviously they're going to use their kitchen sink to wash their hands. They live in a tiny home. They have to save space as much as possible. So it's just this squat toilet and just this shower. And I put the shower on the wall closest to the sink because in my mind, that is where their like water hookup is. I turned my chat on during the stream. I didn't realize it was off. Then I moved on to creating their like entryway, but I remember I felt stuck on how spaces fit together in a tiny home in a way that feels cohesive, because obviously, like, if you were to live in like a regular house, right, you need to have a place to wash yourself, to cook your food, and then like relax. In a tiny home, all those places kind of need to mold together. So while in a lot of houses I create like a entryway, this one, okay, this is so funny. I thought I cut all this stuff out, but I guess not. I was explaining what OBS was. So I remember trying to figure out like a cohesive, like, it's a very linear house. Like a tiny home is basically just like an extended hallway. And I wanted to have a linear feel through the space. So we still needed to have like an entryway, and then there needs to be a living room, kitchen, bathroom, all those things. I again used the Grange mudroom rug, as it is one of my favorite items from the new kit. I used this mirror again, and because I am bad at tool, I scrap my little wood beam idea because I didn't know how to move an item forward along them, so I decided to just get rid of it so I can just hang things on the wall there as is. Here I am trying to figure out like their shoe rack, especially like in a tiny space, despite it being like probably fairly easy to clean. I wanted to create like a space for them to put their shoes down so they're not tracking in their outside dirt, which I think like people should do just in general, you know, in life. I think that's smart to not walk around the house with your shoes on. And then I went and started trying to figure out like the mirror, really creating like their entry space. And of course I settled back on the Grange mudroom mirror, as I really, really like the kit. I think it's a really, really good kit. I know that there was like a lot of deliberation for me in this build when I was trying to figure out how the theme fits together in the location I put them in and inside their own home. Putting them in like the eco lifestyles, like kind of, well, I mean, I guess Evergreen Harbor starts out kind of dirty depending on where you are, and like you can like beautify it based on like how you interact with that space. So this is like a green home in the area, right? The first of many. when I was building their dining area, again, everything needs to be quite small. I tried to like color match with their already established areas, which is why I settled on this table. And then I started expanding out our section here. I start filling in like a lot of the clutter spaces, using them as inspiration as well. I like wanted to use those Sims as like a, how would these Sims live? What would their style be? Which is why I kept going back to them. It's like, what's the vibe here? What is it that they feel like they do? You know, he kind of seems like a I don't know, software developer or something. They're actually not married either. That it's a mom and son, kind of randomly created. Which is another fun way to do a build I've found. Is kind of create just a couple Sims, family, whatever it is, roommates, something, and then try to build around them. And rather than like creating the Sim myself to like create a story, I have them just kind of randomly generated. And it's like, what would this person do? What is their life like? And then building around that, which I think is very fun. There was quite a bit of deliberation in here. While this isn't a space that I ever expect to like play on, I do want every house I build in The Sims to function properly. So you'll notice that like I do leave one of the counter spaces open, because if they were to cook food, they can do it on the counter there. I really like that divider that I used. And then I put in like their water hookup like pipe. I remember thinking that the pipe was, I wanted to find a middle ground with the pipe, but it was either way too large or this size, and I settled on this side because like you can cap the top of a pipe off, you know, it's fine. And then I think that kitchen space, excellent. We do make one more change to it, and I moved on to like their tiny living room. Which again, this is like kind of funny to do because like, again, in a tiny space, you can't have a giant screen. You can't have a giant TV. But I did feel like this TV worked really well because it did look like you can mount it along the metal. And I really, really like that. And I try to color match all the wood and so on. And I also remember, because it looks like it's like on a rotating hinge, like if you were cooking or if you were sitting at their dining table, like you could turn the TV in the direction that you're like in for like maximum efficiency, I guess, which is important to consider in the tiny home, right? So I have a tiny kitchen, we have a functional bathroom, we have an entryway, and then we have like their entertainment area. And I already felt like this build was coming along really, really well and a lot faster than I had initially thought too. Then this was the final suggestion from somebody in chat, was raising up the platform for the kitchen. And I thought that was so smart, and it really brings the whole space like together and separates the areas even further. I felt like it was like such a good suggestion, and I'm gonna have to do it like more often in other builds because wow. And then by doing that, I was able to expand the kitchen a little bit more too, so it looks a little bit better. And again, I want every space to be functional for The Sims. So technically I did play test this, and it all does work. There's enough space for them to navigate and like do the things there. So then I'm creating their bedrooms because again, they're not married. That is a mother and son. So then I needed to make their 2 bedroom upstairs areas. And I get another great suggestion from chat in offsetting the containers, which I think was so genius as well. Oh dang, I don't have some water next to me. This was a struggle for me at first because I didn't know how to initially like maximize their space. And I learned a few things in this build actually that there's a few things that I learned that I really can't wait to implement in future builds as well. Both one being like how to maximize space more efficiently, but also like for decoration. Then we do this, and this changed the game for me. This changed it significantly, because suddenly it felt like we had like I don't know, we aren't gaining any more space, but just by moving it over, it changed so much because the ladder was now in a better place for them to navigate like this upstairs common area, and then their balcony became larger. Ugh. Wow, I'm even admiring my own house again. I just feel like it looks so good. It's definitely one of my favorite builds, especially for like a tiny home, which I'd never done before. I felt like it came out like so good. I'm like so pleased with this. I remember I was deliberating how I wanted to do the outside too. Again, one of the things I do in all of my builds, and I don't like do it on purpose. I'm sure other people are like this, other simmers, builders. They probably jump around from room to room a lot, or like when their idea kind of pops into their head, they need to like kind of think on that in that particular moment and then come back to it later. So I do that so often. I do that a lot. Again, their interior walls, I can't have the same color as like the exterior or like the walls that touch the exterior. So here I am looking at what wallpaper I think would fit her and him for their bedroom walls. And I settled for her on this like kind of yellowy, like bright. And for him, it's just a more basic blue. I know that there is going to be like a lot of little changes in her room. His doesn't change too much. I remember I struggled a lot with finding the perfect space and layout for her. Sorry. Looking at this again too, I think I could have even saved more space in his bedroom. but I'm okay with how things ended up overall. Well, if you notice, like, I'll go down to the bottom level again. It's usually to like a eyedropper, one of the things down there, like the wallpaper or the floor or something that feels like it. So I don't have to look for it. This was tough because I was trying to figure out like a rug that felt like it worked for like a landing, and it took me a really long time to find one that I liked. And then this is the first time I saw that item, like the kitty mat, and I was like, this is huge. What is this used for? But I realized like, oh yeah, like you can build businesses in this game, and if you were to build a daycare, that would make a lot of sense. So then I was like, yes, okay, that makes, of course. Rolled through a bunch of chairs, some desks, went through everything to find what I thought would work. Again, like in a tiny home, you have to use vertical space because you don't have a lot of, I guess I was going to say horizontal space, but floor space, I guess. So, spent a bunch of time trying to find that. I like that. I like the clothes that kind of just hang on racks. I think that's like a really. I kind of wish that my closet was like that instead of just having the doors, which I could just get a clothing rack in real life for that. But I was like, oh, like we'll do that. I decided to get rid of the shoes because we had shoes racks downstairs. I'm like, that doesn't really make sense. Especially like if you took your shoes off downstairs and then you climb up a ladder with your shoes in your hands, like it just doesn't make sense. So I said, well, we'll get rid of that. Keep the shoes downstairs. My gosh. And then we start figuring out some of the clutter items. This is something I'm still really working on. It's like the correct amount of clutter, the correct clutter for the room, like what I think looks the best. I always feel like I am close to what would be perfect, but I'm not quite there. And then I'll see other people build, like, that's so smart. They did that so well. I remember one time I was looking at a shell challenge build, and you know how the ovens have like a clear glass door a lot of the time? I saw somebody put a like bowl, like they used tool to like lower it in there as if something was currently cooking, and I was like, that's so smart, like that's so clever. And I want to be able to figure out how to do things like that for my own builds, and I'm really far off. But that being said, someone finally like explained to me how to move items like on a y-axis in this build, and oh my god, was it the most eye-opening thing I'd ever seen. I was actually so pleased. You can see the clutter suggestions there too. Maybe an upside down book for clutter, which is actually one of my go-tos. I use the paused book all the time. I use it so often. Glasses. More shirts. Nightstand, you know? Little things. Car keys. I love this bookshelf too. But I do wish that like I could straighten out the shelf a little bit. I put a bottle of wine up there because I thought it was funny. But you can see like why I'm so proud of this build, because again, it's a tiny home. I have 64 tiles, and to me at least, as someone who's still fairly new, like simmer and builder still, like it feels like all of the space is very well utilized to feel like it has a lot of like life and character. Like people live here. There's not just a bunch of emptiness. I mean, it's hard for 64 tiles to feel empty, but I felt like it like really came together in like a somewhat realistic way. I gave him a little plant as well. And then when I'm doing these boxes and I wanted to get something up on the higher shelf, this is when someone explains to me, oh, if you just hit like, what is it, 9 and 0 or whatever, you can raise it up on the y-axis. And I was like, oh my god. Look, we'll even see it in chat in a second, right here. Someone's gonna say it. If you hold Alt and press 9 and 0, you can move stuff up and down. This is the biggest tip I've ever heard. Like, oh my god. Here I am using it constantly now. I'm like, okay, I can now fill up this whole section with stuff, storage. Perfection. There's the another, I put the open book again, which would make sense because if you're like on a bunk bed, you can't just like reach over, so you could reach down to put your book there. I have some other storage, like shampoos and things, cleaning supplies, things like that a person would potentially keep like up here. Like, wow. That felt like it looked like really good. I was so pleased. And I think I'd do it a couple more times, but sometimes I just like let an item slot in. And some more plants, the speaker. Thought to find like a small enough plant, nothing really felt like it fit. And these are the bedrooms. And so then I do their little outdoor balcony space, which very simple. Again, using space like vertically, like these boxes, the little wind chime down here. And then that is that's the build. This is me playtesting to see if the things like work, if they can move around. Because again, regardless of whether or not I play a save, I always want to make sure that it is technically a playable area. And it is. And then I start doing the outdoor, what's it called? The landscaping. Wow. The landscaping. This is the first time I've ever gone this in depth in landscaping either. And I think it could be better. I do. But I do really, really like how it came out. I gave them this little cobblestone path. I do some of these like this little flower carpeting, I guess. I don't know what else to call it. I was trying to figure out some water somehow, but then I remember just nixing the idea and thinking, let's just put plants and such. I do plenty of testing of these things, I was like, oh, this looks really cool, and then I was like, actually, it's awful. We can probably do something better. Sorry, I'm really pleased with how this came out. I'm like looking at my work again. I'm like, wow, I really like this. This is one of my favorites. I think I did pretty good. I think I did pretty good. I've been trying to figure out this better as well. I think I did okay. You let me know how I did on the outdoor landscaping, because I personally felt like it looked pretty good. I feel like I've been taking a lot of tips from other like builds I've seen. I wanted to try to make this like dirt, but it had like this weird thing where I couldn't clip onto like what I wanted to correctly. So I ended up just nixing it and we had to move on. I just start putting in a little bit more greenery, some shrubbery. I do some more trees, see what I feel like works the best. I didn't want to block their like floor to ceiling window right there. I wanted to still let them have that kind of view. But that's it.